Hello, everybody. I just got back from seeing Godzilla King of the Monsters, and a lot of people were asking me even before I got there, oh, like, what do you think of it? Like, should I go see it? Since I'm a huge Godzilla fan. So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to do a quick video just talking about my thoughts on it. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, just everything in between. So let's just jump right into it. Uh, so I got to say, my hype going into this movie was like through the roof. Both because I'm a Godzilla fan, but like seeing the trailer, all the monsters, like I love Ghidorah, obviously, Mothra, Rodan. That was one thing from the 2014 version. Like I wanted to see all those monsters again, or just a lot. So this definitely delivers. There's a ton of monsters in this. I was really worried looking at the trailers that this was going to be like one fight at the end and that we wouldn't see very much of them, or that they would just be kind of like all pan by. No, they all get quite a bit, like a fair amount of screen time, and it's like spread throughout. It's not just like, oh, like the third act was where all the monsters came in. Like, no, right out the gate, we get Mothra coming in. Like, we see the larva and everything. So, peppered throughout, we get all our monster fix. I'll also say, compared to the 2014, this one is a lot brighter. So it does have dark moments. Like there's still fighting in like nighttime almost, like solely, and there's tons of storms going on. Like Ghidorah for some reason has a hurricane that is attached to him, but still it's a lot brighter than the 2014 version. I found like I still enjoy it. The 2014 enjoy, but it's best enjoyed in a theater setting. I find anyway. Like I haven't been able to replicate the same amount of joy I got from it as when I saw it in the theater. So this one is a lot brighter than that. So I will say, kind of as a negative, like the brightness is a good thing, but like with characters like Mothra. So again, in the trailer, when we saw the wings and it was like super blue and like all kinds of like radiant like brightness. The only problem I have is like that's constant. Like Mothra is a bright enough character as it is, and it was like they always kind of had like a flashlight on it, like just like look at it, and it was just super bright and shiny like all the time. And I find we didn't need that. But again, I'll take those, like all those colors. Like it wasn't afraid to use blues and like bright yellows and stuff. Whereas this movie, I found it was mostly like blacks and reds were the colors that it used. At least this one had a lot more. Uh, in my mind, anyway. It's been a while since I've watched the 2014 version. One thing that was really cool that I got excited about was they brought back the original themes. So like Mothra, like they remastered it, but like Mothra's music is in this, which is awesome. Even if it's just a little bit, like they don't. I wish there would have been more, but when Mothra fully shows up, we hear her music, which is a little thing, but I love that. Godzilla's theme is in this, which I was excited about. Like, yes. And when the credits roll, this is not a spoiler, but they redid the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla song, and I was like stoked. Like that's awesome. So that was those were the music, the bright colors. These are all improvements over the 2014. I will say the story though, without getting too far into it just yet. I'll wait and do spoilers after. But the story, I almost prefer the 2014 version over, just because I found in this one I didn't really like. It was a little all over the place, but I felt like that because of how scattered it was, like it was more about the monsters, which is a good thing depending on where you come from for this, but it was just the human aspect I could care less. Like I found I cared more about the characters in this one than I did for the King of the Monsters. So it's a give and take kind of thing. I'd say that the King of the Monsters is close in tone and character. Uh, it's closer to Kong Skull Island than it is to any of the other Godzilla films, or even to the first one. It's like Kong Skull Island came out and set the tone for what these are going to be. I find. And then this came out, and then there's going to be a Godzilla versus King Kong that they're working on. So to kind of elaborate a little bit, but without giving too much spoilers, what I mean by the fact that I cared more about the characters in the 2014 one than I did for this one. I don't think it's so much the motivations as it's just there's so many characters in this new one. Like, there's a lot of monsters, which is great, but they also introduced just a ton of new characters, some of which are really interesting. Like, Ken Watanabe is still amazing in this, but others that, like, I could have done without them, honestly. Like, there's this character played by Bradley Whitford. I can't remember the character's name. In my notes, I actually just wrote down, boo. This guy was the comic relief, right? And I couldn't stand... I kind of knew going in from the trailers that he was going to be a bit annoying. Because there's this bit where, like, stuff's happening. People are looking into monitors and they go, oh my god. And he goes, Zilla. And I'm just like, get out. Like, what are you doing? Because think of it this way. I don't recommend comparing this, but if I compare King of the Monsters to Gojira, right? The original. So Godzilla's supposed to be like a force of nature, right? Like, he represents the atomic bomb. Like, it's a big deal, okay? So these monsters are supposed to be like natural disasters. And this stuff's going on in front of these people's eyes, okay? And they're supposed to have, like, this is new, like, right? Like, if monsters just showed up, what is your immediate reaction? Which is, like, maybe awe, terror, like, what, you know, like, there's shock to it. Whether or not, like, this has been a few years between when Godzilla shows up or not, that's still crazy. But this guy, it's not even the actor, it's like the character has zero cares about this whole situation. Like, anytime stuff's going down, he kind of is like, oh yeah, like, he'll wander into a scene. Like, they'll be like, oh my god, like, according to this, Godzilla is right, and then, like, Godzilla show up and they're like, oh my god, like, what is he doing? Like, should we be concerned? And then this dude in the background will be like, hey, you know what? That's crazy, dude. Why don't we just invite him in for a beer? Do. And I'm like, and like, what? I don't know, man. I wasn't on board. I mean, to be fair, even in, like, the Marvel movies and stuff, when, like, serious stuff is going on, and then a character comes in and is like, with a joke, I'm already out. And this dude, the funny thing is, like, at least in a Marvel movie, other characters kind of acknowledge it and go like, ah. But in this, it was like, there's serious stuff going on, and then he would do these jokes, and they'd be like, so that the creature knows, and just, like, it didn't happen. So, could have done without, didn't like that guy. The other members of Monarch, though, they were all pretty good. I mentioned Ken Watanabe, but the lady from Shape of Water was in this again, since she was in the first one, and did excellent. There was also, I'm going to butcher the name, so I apologize, Zai Zhang. She was the actress from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She did very well in this, again, as one of the prime scientists in Monarch. And of course, outside of Monarch, there's like three main hero characters, played by Millie Bobby Brown, or 11 from Stranger Things, which is what she was heavily advertised for this movie. I'm just going to call her 11 throughout this because that's how people are going to associate. But almost to a hilarious degree, this is very similar to the 2014 version where Bryan Cranston was there, and everybody thought, oh my god, Bryan Cranston, like, from Breaking Bad, like, he's gonna be throughout the movie, like, this is odd. And then he wasn't, right? He was not like a main character. It's kind of the same thing here with 11, where she's in it a lot, don't get me wrong, she's in almost like the entire film, but she's not the main character. If anything, the main character is closer to this character named Mark, who's her dad, and he's played by Kyle Chandler, who seemed familiar to me. I couldn't quite place it, and then I realized that he was the hammy actor from Peter Jackson's King Kong. So it's kind of funny that he's gone back to the Godzilla and Kong universe. But yeah, really weird. The mom was fine too. I'm going to butcher her name, so I'm sorry. Vera Farmiga. She was in the Conjuring films. Great actress. So like the characters are all over the place. There's too many of them to kind of keep track of, and they're all going through their own little arcs, and it's just all over the place. Plus, they're showing much more of the monsters this time, which is good, but bad considering you introduce too many human characters. So they all are trying to juggle screen time, and it's all over the place. I mean, I'm trying not to be spoilery here, but it's a minor. It's at the beginning of the movie, so I don't think it'll ruin too much. But for instance, the villain of this movie is this guy who runs, I guess, I don't even want to say it's a terrorist organization, but he's this guy that basically wants to use the monsters on the planet to wipe out the humans. Because the monsters, like, hey, after the last attack, a bunch of plants grew from the radiation or whatever, right? So he's like, well, the humans are like a disease and the monsters are the cure. So, but I'm already hamming him up more than he was. He kind of comes in, just goes, hey, we're going to use the monster. And then, like, he's there periodically. But because we're focused so hard on, like, other characters, I don't really care or know his motivations. Like, let's focus on this for a second. This movie cuts all over the place. Like, the cuts are everywhere. So in any, like, action-centric scene, I'd have a really hard time just figuring out where characters are in relation to one another. So, like, in the trailer, we see Ghidorah in, like, an ice block, right? So there's a whole sequence that takes place in Antarctica. Cool. We've got those villains that I talked about. They're like, we're gonna... this monster that they don't even know exists, even though they kind of do, named Monster Zero, which I thought was a nice touch. Named Monster Zero. We're gonna take him and he's gonna come out and then we'll use... They didn't even think it was a big deal. They were just like, well, we're gonna use him and he's gonna, start the attack or whatever. Cool, great. So we've got these bad guys here who look kind of like military dudes. Then the good guys show up who also kind of look like military dudes, and then they get into a fight. And the camera is like cutting from here to there to all over, like, oh, we're up here, then we're down here, then we're over to the left, and then we're over to the right. And because they all kind of, to me, I couldn't tell who was good or who was bad. So the fight was going on, and people were like shooting and stuff, and like, I'm just having a hard time. I'm like, good. Like, I didn't know what was going on at any given point in that scene. That was a long sequence. The only thing that kind of helped was I'd be like, okay, that guy's a good guy, and he's next to these other guys, and they're not trying to kill him, so they're probably also good. It sounds like I'm over exaggerating. It really does. But here's another example. So there's monsters fighting, right? They're going to town. They're doing their thing. We got people over here like watching them, like, oh no. So it cuts to the monsters. They're fighting. Cuts to these people. Then it cuts to these other people. Then it cuts to the ship. Like these people being like, oh no, what are we gonna... Then it cuts to another ship being like, oh my god, what's your 20? Then it cuts to the back of a ship. I don't know which one. Is it the first one we were? I don't know. Cuts to another ship, and then it's those people behind. So I'm like, wait, were we in the same ship, or did it cut around? There was a lot of that in this movie. I swear, I'll give you another example here, and then I'll stop. But there's a point very late into the film. It's not very spoilery, because again, we know it's about Mothra. We know that Mothra shows up, because in the trailers, Mothra shows up. So they're on the... Okay, so the humans are on this battleship, and Mark comes out of the battleship and Mothra shows up. Like, comes down from the sky. It's very bright yet again. So super bright light, Mothra comes down, right? And Mark is like, whoa, it's Mothra. Immediately cuts. We're in the ship to people looking at their monitors and reacting to what I assume is Mothra. Them being like, wow, that's crazy. And Mark just walks casually into the shot being like, oh, what's going on there? Wasn't he just outside? Like, he didn't run in, because he didn't come into the scene like, Mothra. Like, that didn't happen. He just walked in being like, I was here all along. So I'll try to wrap this up. Let's get into some spoiler territory by getting right into the plot. So I'll start off just explaining kind of the synopsis. If you don't want that, get out now. Then I'll get into like what I would have changed. So base point is just, and this is without spoiler. It's just the base point. I know I'm being very careful. Base point is villain I talked about steals this machine that communicates with the monsters, right? Just kind of like, not communicates, like you can't be like, hello, Mothra. That's not how it works. You're just like turning some knobs and then you're like, hey, I'm not a threat, or hey, like, get the hell away. I am a threat. Basically all it does. So the villain steals this and Eleven and her mom go with in order to wake up Ghidorah, and he's going to use these monsters to kind of, you know, like kill humanity as a side effect. That's not his main goal. It's just basically to kind of like make the world a better place. One of those. So he steals this thing to do that. They wake up Ghidorah. Now I'm getting into spoilers right now. Turns out the mom just turns code on a dime, decides, you know what? This guy's right. Helps him out, and then is straight up a better villain than he is, because she like does that thing where they come on a TV screen and they're like, hey, this is my major plan, and tells the whole plan like it was her idea all along, which confused the hell out of me, because I'm like, wait, was she in on this the whole time? Because she seems to have a better grasp on what she wants out of this than this other guy. So yeah, then like, because they woke up Ghidorah, like, and like Mothra's out doing her thing, there's a bunch of fights, and then they wake up Rodan, and he starts off being like, I'll fight Ghidorah, and then like that doesn't pan out, and he's like, you know what, I'll work for Ghidorah. And then all the other monsters are being woken up by Ghidorah, who is just like, I'm gonna bring all the monsters out and I'm gonna rule the world type of thing. Like, it's not, they are thinking that the monsters out of some weird harmony is gonna make the world better, but then Ghidorah's like, you know what, no, we're just gonna, I'm gonna rule the planet, essentially. And that's kind of the main plot of the movie. Super spoilers, they introduced the oxygen destroyer, which really made me angry. At first I was like, neat. Like, it's the oxygen destroyer. But here's the thing. For those of you who don't know, in the original movie, the oxygen destroyer is what just killed Godzilla. And it's like, it's a big deal, right? Like, this scientist invents it. And it's like, oh, like, should I use it? Should I not? Like, it's a big deal. In this movie, literally, they're like, hey, like, the military calls up, like, on a video screen, like, boop, hey, we made this thing called the oxygen destroyer, which I'm like, oh, neat. We've already fired it. It's on its way. So I'm like, wait, what? So I'm like, well, there goes Godzilla. That's it. Comes down, and while he was fighting Ghidorah, like nothing, just like flies away like nothing happened. Which I'm like, what? Godzilla also goes close to death, but doesn't die. So I'm like, why would you bring back? Why wouldn't you just say, look, we're researching into these plans, and then show like oxygen destroyer, and then people be like, oh, ooh, that's crazy, and then just don't talk about it. Just like throw regular missiles at them. Like, we don't need it. There's no point. If you're bringing in the oxygen destroyer, that should be like, show's over, you know? Like, but no. So that was the thing that bugged me. The other thing is, so I've told you the plot. In my mind, we don't need Eleven and her mom, nor do we need this Mark character, her dad. I think the movie would be 10 times better if you took them out, right? And this villain, instead of being some kind of weird terrorist or whatever, how about like he worships Ghidorah, right? Like, maybe there's like a cult weird thing going on, like, you know, the image in the trailer with the cross. Maybe they worship Ghidorah and Monarch doesn't know about Ghidorah yet, right? So then they steal this like machine to try and wake him up. And then he comes out and then starts waking up all the monsters that maybe Monarch's just studying, you know? That way you don't need all this extra crap around it. It's just like, hey, this group is bringing him out, and then turns out he's bad news, you know? Then maybe they wake up Rodan thinking that like there's some kind of prophecy of some flying monster. So they wake up Rodan thinking that's it. It's not. Rodan turns on them. Then they get Mothra finally. Maybe they can't find Godzilla this whole time. That's the other thing, because he just kind of shows up here and there, which I was like not that into. At first I was like, oh, sweet. But then he just like, he'll show up and then fail, and then show up and then fail. Or he'll show up and then be like, look, isn't that cool? And then he'll leave again. So how about like after the first movie, how about they can't find him? Maybe that's why maybe that's why Monarch is in hot water. They can't find this crazy king of the monsters, right? So they're like scrambling. They're like, okay, well, we have all these documents on all these other monsters and whatnot, right? The whole thing I talked about with the King Ghidorah thing happens. Then they screw up with Rodan, like I said. They end up finding Mothra, who then brings Godzilla out of hiding. Then they team up and go after Ghidorah and Rodan. That's what I would have done. I don't know. Just, it takes out all the weirdness. Because like I said, 11, I didn't like, I don't know. It felt like forced a lot of the time. And I think it's just the turncoat of the mom that didn't make sense to me. And that was really throwing me off. Another weird thing that goes with the cutting is, and it also like a weird throwback, is Zai Zhang. Again, I'm probably screwing up her name. She actually is a double role, which took me a hot minute to realize, because she's supposed to be twin scientists, and twins run in the family. And hey, it turns out they studied Mothra a lot. So you're like, oh, like the fairies, right? That's crazy. And I was like, wait a minute, why isn't this played up more? Like, it was just kind of an offhanded thing. And then they just were like, and just forgot about it. Like, I almost forgot about it. Why, if that's the case, then, again, we don't have the mom in this in my version. Whoop, gone. Why don't those two scientists be the ones to discover Mothra, or be the ones to suggest, hey, Mothra will probably fix these problems, so they go looking for her? I don't know. If you're going to do that, why not super do that instead of just kind of mention it and then let's forget that happened? I don't know. I think overall, like, it has some good monster things going for it, but just story-wise, this was really just all over the map. I feel like it could have been way better. There is an after credits stinger, which is like, again, spoilers, maybe Ghidorah might come back. And over the credits, they are like playing the Blue Oyster Cult song, which is awesome. But they're showing a lot of like clips of being like, oh, there's, activity from Skull Island, and like stuff at Skull Island is going on. And they're hyping that it's like, King Kong versus Godzilla is coming. And all I could think was, I mean, we just fought and won against a golden dragon with 3 heads that's supposed to be like an alien from like that. My point is, we won against that. Why is giant ape a threat? Like, there's not, even in the old series, we went from Kong to Ghidorah. We didn't go from Ghidorah to Kong. Like, that seems like a step back, It the only thing that's large about that is the marquee value, because you have like, King Kong, the American monster, versus Godzilla, the Japanese monster. But this is like, we're hyped for it. But I'm like, we just fought something that in my mind is a much greater threat. I don't know. I'm still excited, but it's weird that they hype it with nothing behind it. Last thing I swear as well that I would have changed. With the credits thing with Kong, throughout the movie when they're talking about there's a whole bunch. I think they said there was like 16 or 17 monsters, and they showed like a map, which I was like desperately trying to read. Like, do they have the names? and they mentioned Skull Island multiple times, and I'm like, why don't you just not say anything about Skull Island? And then when the credits kick up and they're like, hey, activity on an unknown island dubbed Skull Island or whatever, then you go, ooh, like, why would, instead of having it peppered throughout and then pretending it's a surprise, a little bit weird. The creatures that they listed, the only one that I saw that took me away from Skull Island was they had Titanosaurus there, which I was like, hey, cool. But all the creatures that gather, because again, there's more than just the ones in the trailer, they're all kind of originals. And they brought the Mutos back. And I'm like, that's, I guess, kind of neat, but why wouldn't you bring, like, I don't know, Anguirus? I don't know. Why don't you just bring a couple of the ones from the original series instead of inventing like weird other one? I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I say it's a fun movie. If you like Godzilla, it's worth checking out in that respect. But the plot, to me, is the biggest downside. It's a bit of a mess. But hey, it's a fun popcorn flick, so check it out. So thanks for watching. I am working on a few videos just going over my Godzilla collection. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more structured than this. Again, I've had to record this a couple of times because I've got so much thoughts. I just came out of the movie and was trying to whip this together. So my apologies if it's a bit scattered, because so am I. But yeah, I'll be doing a few videos about my Godzilla collection and just how to go about collecting some of these guys, since some are harder to find than others and some editions are a little bit worse off than others. So hopefully that'll come out soon. But in the meantime, thanks again.